Hey, we met at the American Legion.
Yes, we did.
Wayne Bierman wanted us to meet for a very long time. He's like,
Yes, yes, he
yes,
did.
he's like, you have got to meet Cindy. She's awesome. One of the things that we do before we jump in and just start talking about who you are, the role as a police chaplain, ministry. Tell me what post of the American Legion you're from.
I am from the Daniel R. Olson American Legion Post in Eagen, Minnesota.
Hey, woohoo! Thank you for that. Yes, you are a minister.
I am. I'm a United Methodist minister, have been since 19.
What encouraged you to get into the ministry?
Well, I get asked that a lot. I am
Do you?
what's called an ordained deacon in the United Methodist Connection. I was very unsatisfied with our Sunday school curriculum. And I thought, surely there has to be a better way. And I started asking too many questions. And finally, my pastor said, you're just going to have to go to seminary for that. Fall of 19, I entered seminary, and I like to say I managed to cram a 2-year degree into 6 years. I had 3 young children and a husband who was active duty Army and worked what felt like around the clock. So yeah, it was a busy time in my life.
I'll bet it was. The United Methodist Church ordains women.
Yes.
And have, I think, ever since, or was there a time that they didn't?
Oh, yes, there was. But women have always been preachers in the United Methodist Church, going back to its origins. They just were not ordained people.
Okay.
I should know this, but my sisters in the United Methodist Connection, clergy sisters, would be unhappy that I don't know the date, but I think it was 19. Don't quote me on that.
Okay. So women have always played an active role in the United Methodist. And are United Methodists an American-only faith group, or are they around the world?
It's a worldwide denomination. Began in England with John Wesley, and he ordained 2 people as bishops after the American Revolution broke out, and all of the Anglican priests went either to Canada or back to England. And so people were left with no way to baptize and get married and all that. And so that's where the denomination started. It has its origins in our own American Revolution.
I like the name United because we're together, and Methodist because there's a method to how you do things.
It was actually a derogatory term. They were called methodical and enthusiasts, both of which were not nice words back in the day.
Oh my.
But yes, Mr. Wesley was quite methodical, as was his brother Charles, who wrote many of our hymns. And so, yeah, it was
beautiful hymns. I grew up Roman Catholic.
Okay.
And I learned in seminary that it was a derogatory term also because Catholic or Catholicism means universal.
Right.
And so then when they put a name and a location on it, they limited the universality of the faith. So interesting.
Yeah.
So we become sometimes, or we belong to things without clearly knowing the history. So anyway, I got to meet you in person finally a few months ago after a long wait, if you will. And we just hit it off right off the bat.
I know, it's lovely.
We had a lot to say about spirituality. And I think we were talking a little bit about like despair, the uncomfortableness that we have in our culture to be able to talk about who we are spiritually, and even religiously. And so did you want to pick up on any of that? Because you had some beautiful things.
Well, I can't remember what I did yesterday, let alone a couple months ago. I think one of the things for me is, you hear commentary about the epidemic of loneliness, particularly amongst young people, but also amongst the elderly. And this sort of backing away from what people like to call organized religion. I said, I'm more of a disorganized religion kind of person in that I come at my faith from so many different angles. But really, when you think about what does it mean to be a person who is spiritual? What does it mean to be a person of faith? I have a line that I use nearly every day, and it's just all I want to do is live, love, and serve in the way of Jesus. And so we got to think about what does that actually mean to live and love and serve in the way of Jesus. We're very fond of the nativity, and we talk often, of course, about the resurrection, as we should. But there's this whole thing in the middle about what kind of human are you going to be as you move through the world? What kind of a person do you want to be? How do you want to be known? And for me, it's part of the reason I joined the Navy in the first place. A desire to serve my country, to serve this country that has given me so much. And it's the same going into this process of ordination. How do you serve this risen Christ? How do you work to give yourself over to making a difference in the world in whatever small way that you can? And so for me, it's talking about, what does it mean to be kind? What does it mean really for us to be open-hearted? Yesterday during worship, I made kind of a big, and I know better, right? Like I just told you, I've been doing this for 30 years. I thought we were at the end of the hymn, so I went forward and sat down to do my kids ministry thing, and they're still singing. I'm like, oh, well, I'm just going to sit here. And, and I am very fond of making fun of myself. But what I want is for people to feel the joy of what it means to be connected, a community that will surround you, a place where you are so deeply known, not just by your face, the outward sign of who you are and what you look like. Oh, I now know what Kelly looks like, right? Because we've met in person. I can see your face now. So, but it's like, there's this sense of, hey, know someone, and I will miss them if I don't get to see them. And that's what faith community does for us. It provides a place, unlike the bar cheers, where you really are known by your name and by who you are, and you are missed when you aren't there. It's not a guilt thing. It's simply, I miss having you in my life. And when we gather, we see each other's faces, we pray for each other. I could go on and I won't.
Well, one of the things, Cindy, you prompted my mind to remember is Dr. Yalom, a psychotherapist who started studying groups, if you're familiar with Yalom's work. And he learned over studying group behavior is that we all have this desire to be loved. We all want to be loved. But the biggest fear we have is being loved, because then it opens us up to this vulnerability. And I was talking to my daughters the other day, 21 and 23, and they grew up with Facebook and Twitter and all these platforms. And one of the things that they said was, you always have to put your best face forward. Like, nobody really knows you because you're always filtering yourself. And so you always have that outward face, but then they're not able to connect like you would be able to in a community, if you're saying. And the other thing is, we already know that religions have been proven through research, correct research, double-blind studies, and so on and so forth, to increase connection, thereby reducing loneliness. Yeah.
I just, when you are part of something where you can be vulnerable, the thing for me about church and why we gather in that kind of community, I love being part of the American Legion. And when I go, people are genuinely glad to see me, right? I'm genuinely glad to see them. But we're there because of our military connection. One thing, our military connection. I can go to an Eagen Foundation board, and we're there for one reason. We support the city of Eagen and give scholarships to kids in high school, right? That's our reason for existing. But when I go to church, I am surrounded by people of every kind of background, all races, all ethnicities. We have a Korean congregation that meets in the same building, and they're teaching me some Korean. Like, I am surrounded by people who are so radically different from me and yet identical.
Right.
Because we love the same Lord and we try to live in that way. And that is the thing for me about being part of a church community, is you really do learn, at least I learned growing up, that everyone has value. We're all here together and across whatever barriers society might try to put up around us.
Yeah. We live in this very reasoned, logical, evidence-based, scientific world where our beliefs really hinge on this sense of validity that we need from some kind of a research piece. And faith and spirituality goes against that grain, if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's mystery, I can't give you. I remember one time a Bible study group had an urgent question for me. I had to show up at their Tuesday night study because they just needed me to be there. And the question was, so tell us exactly what heaven looks like.
Right.
I'm still on this side of it. I don't know exactly. We have hints, we have clues that have been left for us. And so we have to live into that mystery. We have to be comfortable giving up that scientific knowledge base, rational research base. And hey, I'm a historian by nature. That was my degree. I love evidence-based things. I love doing research.
Yeah.
But you also have to learn to be like
Trust
in
the unknown.
Yeah.
And giving up some of that cognitive frontal lobe connection or desire, right?
Right.
Yes. There's a whole brain in there that probably isn't as uncomfortable with the unknowing as our frontal lobe is, with that high functioning piece.
Preach it, sister. Preach it.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
I struggle wanting some evidence before I'll commit, but I know being married also is a decision that you have to trust.
Yeah.
You have to trust.
Absolutely.
And so to me, I don't think we're ever going to be able to evolve away from the mysteries of life. You are somebody who has walked alongside many individuals through despair, through joy, through anguish, through expectations of bringing in new life.
Yeah.
And things of that nature. It sounds like it's only increased your trust.
Well, absolutely. The fact that you're walking with people and, sometimes it's all within a matter of a couple of days, right? You receive word that someone has given birth. Woo! Hallelujah. So everyone's safe. Everyone, baby's doing well.
Right.
And the next phone call is someone's passing or someone's been through in a car accident or died. It's being comfortable enough in your faith to say, God is with you in this moment. God, God is blessing this moment, even in the despair. I often talk about life as tapestry. The finished work, the tapestry of my life that I like to show people is beautiful. And am I willing to show you the backside of that tapestry once in a while?
And what are you going to do with it?
What do you do with that?
Right.
Because there's some of that is some really ugly looking knots and threads.
Yeah.
And that gets back to our question around vulnerability, right? And it's how we look at that life that we have. Am I looking at from that backside all the time? And I'm not talking about a false sense of presenting yourself. Like, look at me, I'm perfect. That's that social media thing of, I cannot get on social media until I've got my hair combed just right, my makeup just right, and I've lost that 20 pounds I wanted to lose, or whatever. It's that sense of being able to see the beauty even in the midst of the knots and the tangles of my life. That there's still a beautiful side to things. Yes, my husband passed away. The grief was paused during the lockdown part of COVID. When the first anniversary hit, all of us who were actively serving in churches were frantically trying to figure out how are we going to do worship. For me, that carried me through some of those first days of grief, the tangles and knots of that. I had to be able to keep going. But the second year, immobilized by grief, absolutely immobilized. And so it's that ability for us to, and I wouldn't talk about it with anyone, because, I'm a pastor, I'm a leader, non-anxious presence. I am the one who is always well, always doing fine. How are you today? Fabulous. And
you said mobilized your grief on the second year. What did that mean to you?
I'm sitting right here in my little living room, and I was sitting in my chair and literally could not get up. I managed to take care of a couple. I had to preach that next day. It was a Saturday, and I had nothing. I'm just like, I can't. I can't. And I managed to get up long enough to take care of some bodily functions, and that was about it. And about 5:00 that evening, I made myself put my shoes on and go outside for a walk. Beautiful day. Beautiful April day. Walked down to the church, let myself in, and just said, God, you're going to have to do this. I physically, I mentally, emotionally, everything. I can't. I'm told, I don't remember. It was my best sermon ever.
Oh.
But that's what happens when you let you let God do the heavy lifting sometimes, you know.
You have that
And
relationship
yeah,
to lean on.
yeah, lean into my faith, lean into that love that I know is there. I do know myself to be able to love a child of God, and that's all I want for everyone else. Everyone else. You look exactly like God. You are the beautiful face of God. Now, if you don't see yourself that way, well, let's talk about that.
Right.
Let's talk about that. How can I walk with you as we look at what it means to be beautiful in the eyes of God? So,
because we so often have a different view of ourselves.
oh, amen.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 5'2" and wish I was about 6 inches taller and 20 pounds lighter, and all
Yeah.
et cetera, right? And
Yeah.
I actually, that's not me anymore. I am who I am. I tell people this is as good as it gets. Right here, right? This is
Right.
me. There's no other Cindy hanging out now. I can move up and down the scale. Like if it's an official event, I showed up at that American Legion event all, decked out in,
Yep.
I know how to dress it up. I know how to be appropriate in the right times, but you're still going to get, this is me.
Some
I love
transparency.
transparency. Absolutely. Transparency and vulnerability. I don't know when or how I made that. I don't know. It wasn't a conscious decision. It
Right.
was simply a little bit of Brene Brown podcast listening, I suppose, and book reading, and Barbara Brown Taylor, and a few of these other favorites of mine. The music of Sarah Thompson, all of those things woven together helped me to see myself as that beloved child of God, just as I am. So,
And one of the things that I've been learning, and it sounds like you're learning too, is I remember in my 20s and the weight I was at and how I presented myself. And then when I got into my 30s, I was able to look back and things changed. Like I wasn't the same person. I wasn't the same weight. Everything changed. And then I got into my 40s and things changed again. Right. And then I'm looking back and I'm like, there was a moment of like, oh, if I would have only known then what I know now about so many things, I wouldn't have been so hard on myself. So that wisdom that comes along with aging.
and absolutely, when I look back and think, I really thought that mattered, right? I really thought that is what defined me.
Yep.
I went into the Navy right out of high school. Like, seriously, went downtown and enlisted 2 days after graduation, shipped out a month later. I was determined. And
did anyone in your family?
I had a cousin who joined the Navy, but that had been several years before, and he didn't like it. So it really wasn't a positive. I liked his uniform, knowing full well I wouldn't get to wear the same uniform. I was determined to get the GI Bill. To use the GI Bill. I was determined to get a college. My grandfather said women didn't need more than an 8th grade education. And, that was just the ethos of my whole family. And I was the odd one out in a couple of ways. One, I was deeply spiritual, even as a kid and all through school. When nobody else in my family went to church, I was still going every Sunday, singing with the contemporary singers, and loving it. And I was determined to get a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
And I obviously went on further than that. But and I wanted out of St. Paul, Minnesota.
How many years were you in the Navy, Cindy?
I served active duty 3 years, 1 year in
Okay.
the Navy Reserve, and about 8 years in the Army National Guard.
Okay.
Yeah,
Ah,
I know.
yay.
I
Female vet
know.
right here.
I had someone approach me at a concert one time. You know how you stand up for your service song and then you sit down? And she came up to me and said, maybe you didn't understand. You were, you were supposed to have been in the service. And I said, well, thank you, ma'am, for your comment. Actually, I have been in both. I was active duty Navy and Army National Guard. And then she yells up to her husband, Harold, she was in both. So clearly my movement had created some distraction from the audience.
Sure.
But I loved every bit of active duty Navy.
We, as females, it seems there's this active war going on to validate who we are as individuals. And for me, I think sometimes knowing who you are spiritually or who you belong to can help have that not be so active in your life where you're just not always on a mission.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it absolutely. There's, people say, well, gee, if you loved it so much, does that mean you didn't encounter any, of the obstacles other women have faced? And it's like, of course I did.
Sure.
We all did.
Yeah.
And if you didn't, wow, I don't know what branch you were in, but God bless you, right? But for me, I was able to deal with it because I think I had this, even though I couldn't have named it at 18 years old, this strong sense, my faith was so strong. In fact, every aptitude test I ever took said I should become a nun because that's really the only religious thing open to women, right?
Right.
And I was like, well, that's not going to work so great because I'm not Roman Catholic, and by this point, I was also married.
On years ago, before I got into the ministry, I felt this strong calling to go into the ministry, which was completely against anything that I would have ever considered before. But I was very active in spiritual edification, if you will. And I asked my husband, this is kind of like you don't know what you don't know, but I asked my husband, I said, I feel like I should be in the ministry. And he's like, well, I wasn't raised that way. So I actually asked my husband permission to do something that I felt God was calling me to do. And we look back at it now saying, we didn't know what we didn't know.
Right?
And how silly is that I had to give you permission. And, a couple months later, after we had talked about that, I asked him, I said, have you ever had to get permission from another human being to do something that you felt you were called to do? And he's like, that's a strange question.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I've spent a majority of my life asking permission to do something that I had felt called to do. But anyway, so we just laugh about it, and it's just part and parcel of who I am, and it sounds like a little bit about who you are too. One of the other things about you that I really, in addition to being a beautiful human being, but I wanted to, to talk with us a little bit about, you're a police chaplain, and there's not a lot of them, but there's do you get paid to do that, or how does that happen?
Well, I am proud to serve the city of Eagen as a police chaplain. It was something I was invited to do. I was reflecting on this, given your question about, like, how did this happen? And I'm guessing it's a good 10 years ago, the former police chief invited me to lunch to discuss being a police chaplain. At the time, I was living about 12 miles away from the city of Eagen, and, married Still had one daughter at home.
Oh,
And my husband, and this goes back to your previous question, was discussing it with me and saying, well, but you're going to see some awful things as a police
mm,
chaplain. Well, you see some things as a pastor too. So, that wasn't what
oh,
troubled me. But then you started to think about middle of the night call outs and trying to get to somebody who's in crisis and
mhm,
there's a snowstorm and you're that far away.
mm,
And so I, at the time, turned down the offer to come on board as a chaplain. And then after my husband passed away, and I was actively starting to uh, nibble at finding other ways to serve my community, to just do something besides um, being in the local church. I was
okay.
working like 60 hours a week and loving every bit of it. Really, I never have to go to work. What I do
Uh-huh.
is what I love. But I needed to meet some other people, do some other things,
Mm,
find, and so went to breakfast with the new police chief, and we got talking about it. I was sworn in as police chaplains, at least in the city of Eagen.
mhm.
We are allowed and encouraged to participate in every kind of training that the officers
Oh,
participate in. So we can go to the rifle range, for instance, and
uh-huh.
I've done so. We can do use of force training if we'd like. I haven't yet, because I'm in active ministry. I haven't had the time for that. But
Okay.
upcoming next week is the biannual police staff meeting, and we are
Uh-huh.
invited to that and participate fully in any kind of meetings that they have. It is an unpaid position, and we work rotating shifts,
Mm,
24-hour shifts,
mm,
for 3 days, 2 to 3 days at a time. Um, I make a point to participate with the police department in National Night Out
okay.
here in Eagan,
Uh-huh.
and go to as many of the communities as I can. And without fail, what I hear, and everywhere I go where I introduce myself as a police chaplain, um, people say, I didn't know we had those. And I say, you
Right.
haven't had your worst day yet. You will meet me on your worst day. Um,
Mm,
and that's a hard thing to say to people, because you're going to immediately back away when you hear that. When someone says that to you, that's the automatic response. I get it every single time of oh, but what the blessing of that is you have someone to be with you on your worst day.
yeah.
Um, when my husband died, I declined having a chaplain come. I'm like, oh, you know, I am
Mm,
one of them.
mhm,
It was a mistake, a
mm,
big mistake. Because as a chaplain, I come and I sit with people, the survivors, if there's surviving, I meet with the surviving family members or whatever. My last
mm,
call out was at a group home, so I was meeting with the manager and the of the group home, to just walk through the process of, walk through what has happened, to hear them in their trauma, in their grief, to be that um, non-anxious presence, to be
mhm,
that's a term we use. Yeah,
mhm,
it's an insider term. I acknowledge that to just be that listening ear,
mhm,
um, but also as a veteran,
mm,
if the deceased person is a veteran, I also have other information for them, how to get a hold of Fort Snelling, how to. I've worked for many years with a local funeral home, 30 years with the same funeral home, doing on-call funerals for veterans, at no cost, because I believe it's one way to give back to my sisters and brothers in uniform. And so I bring to this position a broader sense of what it means to sit with you in that, and
mhm.
walk with you
That
through it
human,
as a human.
the human
Human.
touch, but
Yeah,
you also have experience in
yeah,
as a chaplain
yeah,
in the police force. you have to be able to keep your wits about you.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
And there's nothing, there's no scene, there's no trauma, there's no, um, we just walked through 2 awful, awful weeks here. City of Eagen is back up for Burnsville. Our police were there. These are their brothers and sisters
yeah,
in blue and in the red. Our firefighters and medical personnel as well. It has been devastating. And
there was a
so
crisis, right,
it
Cindy?
was,
There was
yes,
something that
yeah,
the police force
yes.
had to respond to.
The Burnsville police
Yep.
officers and EMT that were um, killed in the line of duty.
Right.
Um, we provided backup staffing so that the entire Burnsville department could be on leave and grieve. And so it's very close. Burnsville is adjacent to Eagen. But there's also just the fellowship of the blue and the red. And so I have a badge. It looks just exactly like one that the officers wear.
Chaplain police.
Chaplain police. It's got my ID on the back.
Okay. So they
And I
know that you
wore,
can be there.
yes, so they know I'm authorized to be there. And I wear this with a lot of pride and humility, deep humility, that I've been invited not into the lives of people who have experienced something that has allowed me to be there, but for the officers as well. We there was a group of them hanging out having coffee at Holiday gas station nearby. And so I stopped in and I said, "Hi." And their immediate response is kind of, "Oh, it's a citizen. Hello." And I said, "Well, I'm one of your chaplains." Immediately the tenor changes because it's like, I'm a safe person for you to be around.
Oh,
I will do you no harm.
I will do you no harm.
And so it's just such a privilege to walk with them. They're a pretty stoic bunch.
They are.
And for good reason. You
Yep.
have to have nerves of steel to do this kind of work. A part of my backstory is when I was stationed in Adak, Alaska with the Navy. I was deputized as a security patrol. They needed females to do drug searches and such. And so I was given a badge and a billy club and a set of handcuffs and a 357 Magnum. And when I was being ordained, my bishop said, "Tell me something I can't tell by looking at you." And I said, "Well, this is the role I played." And people without fail say, "Did you like it?" I'm like,
Oh,
"You say, aye, aye, sir." They give you something to do and you do it.
sure.
But I did it well. And so I have a teeny tiny itsy bitsy feel for what it means to wear a badge out on the street, given the undercover kind of work I had to do in a remote duty station far, far from here. So there's no comparison other than in my own mind, I know what it means to have to just do
The work.
It's a calling, my calling is to the church. Their calling is to serve a community. And without fail, and I tell them this all the time, both police and fire, because I interact with all of them, but strictly as a chaplain, strictly with the police. But we all talk. I tell them, I'm the crazy person you see out on the street every time, every police car, every ambulance, every fire truck. I stand tall, at attention, and I salute you. And whether you want me to or not, I'm going to keep on doing it because I know that you are doing work. You go into the places the rest of us run from.
There's something unique about someone who's just there to support. You don't have a care plan.
Nope.
You don't have any goals that you have to complete. You're
Nope.
not there to evaluate them. You're there to be with them.
Fully present. I am here
Fully
for
present.
you. What do you need in this moment? How can I walk with you in this moment?
And someone who is able to be separate to some degree,
Yes.
but to be effective in providing that balm,
Yeah.
that comfort,
Yeah.
and to be real, knowing. And that sounds like it
Yeah.
comes from a strong sense of who you are. And there's a purpose to life, even though it's ugly.
It's the duality of service, right? Like it's
Ah.
that, I've been on the receiving end
Mm-hmm.
of being cared for through trauma or grief or whatever. But to be there with people and to be able to just sit with folks, and listen and just be that comforting presence. As a police chaplain, I have no agenda when I go. I have a packet I carry with me that has helpful information should a family want or need that.
Mm-hmm.
And I will ask, would you like me to pray with you? But it's never, usually people ask me, could you pray with us? Can you pray with me?
Right.
Well before it's usually one of the last things before I'm leaving. And we tend not to stay terribly long.
Oh.
Maybe, we're encouraged to,
Know when to go.
know when to go. It's
Know
like
when to go.
visiting, just like making a hospital visit or any of those other things that we do. It's know when it's time. And without fail, every call out I've had, people are, oh yes, please. And it's such a gift to be able to serve my community in this small way.
You brought up something that's very, very important, that pastors, chaplains, spiritually inclined individuals, and then trained professional caregivers do, is you ask permission.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
empowering, and it sounds like that's very helpful in a crisis moment.
Yeah.
Where you really can help people determine what they need and what they don't need, where you're not an authority, but I'm here for you. May I?
May I pray with you? And and I always, of course, it's all prefaced by, this is totally whatever you're comfortable with, in whatever way will bring you some small moment of comfort at this particular time. We have cards that we leave behind. I think I showed you one. I think I gave you one. I don't carry any business cards anymore.
You
other than
did, and
those. Yes.
yeah, it had an email and no phone number.
Oh no! Usually I put my phone number on there. Sorry about that.
Well, I just thought maybe that was done on purpose.
No.
Oh, okay.
The card itself does not carry any personal information other than my name, but given my last name, I'm not hard to find. Sadly, but we leave a card, we leave the packet. I always offer for them to give me a call if they need anything more, if there's anything more I can help you with, in terms of making arrangements or whatever. So far, no one has ever called back, but I think you can see almost a sense of something kind of it takes over your body when it's like, oh, this person really means it.
Yeah.
Like, she's not just here right now. She's actually genuinely caring about me and caring for me. There's a relaxation of the body that happens when they realize I'm not there to preach. No, not at all. In fact, it's forbidden.
Right.
We are simply there to be there.
That connection piece, which is a complete spiritual it's in the spiritual realm of who
Yeah.
we are. Like, we're spiritual beings because of our desire to connect,
Yeah.
and that benefits each other. And I'm also thinking of compassion, that
Yeah.
compases, to suffer
And
alongside, to suffer with.
just
And that's
it,
what a
it-
police chaplain does.
yeah. And from a very practical standpoint for the department, what it
Uh-huh.
does is the police aren't, that's not their job. That sounds
Hmm.
harsh, but they have their work they have to do. And
Hmm.
so if you've got someone there who really needs someone to sit with them,
Right.
that's not what they can do. And they may have a next call they have to get to. They've done what they can do here. They've got to
Right.
go because there's the next thing has happened. And so we provide that sort of buffer as well. Like, they don't just come in and leave. What the chaplain brings is also someone to just give you some time
Right.
that,
One of the things that I stopped doing as a chaplain is I stopped wearing a watch.
yeah.
I think it's the only discipline, if you will,
Mhm.
that has the availability or the expectation to be with and to know when to stay and to know when to go.
Yeah.
And that dignity piece, probably you lead out with that dignity, that you are a beautiful human being that I'm going to love on in
Yeah.
a way that is accepting to you.
Whatever I
Mm,
can do in
whatever
this
you,
moment,
yeah.
within reason.
There are limitations, right?
I do have limitations.
Yeah.
But
Eh,
no, it's just, I was sworn in 2
mhm.
weeks before the pandemic started. And
Oh,
so,
okay.
as a police chaplain, all we could do for almost a full solid year
Uh-huh.
was write. There was a weekly newsletter that we sent out. And
Mm.
there's currently 5 of us on a rotating cycle. We have another one coming aboard here in June, I believe. It's a long process to
There's a
become
lot
a.
of vetting.
There is a whole lot.
Mm,
We do all the same kind of background checks and such. We are considered part of the department, um, and so they want to make sure they've invited the right people to do this
right.
ministry with them, and but nonetheless, for that whole year, all we could do was send this weekly newsletter
Mhm.
of our thoughts, our prayers, our concerns. We usually had a weekly theme that we would reflect on.
Mm.
And so so I always kind of felt like I was trying to play catch up once we were able to start meeting with the officers and going on call outs again. Um, it was another whole cycle of learning how to do this ministry face to face when we'd only been doing it through emails with the officers.
Mhm.
And so for me, it's only been, I guess I've been actually doing this now for however long it's been since the pandemic eased to the point where we could meet with people again, probably a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah,
I don't, 2 years,
this is 2024.
4.
So I think about 2022,
Yes.
we started to feel like we could see each
Yeah,
other in person,
in
right?
person.
Mm,
So, yeah. Uh,
yeah.
so, the number of call outs haven't been huge, but they have each impacted a number of lives. And it ranges the gamut of what you can imagine a police officer being called to and what we're called to. So,
Um, to be able to be there and connect and provide
yeah.
solace, I think is something all chaplains and probably
Mhm.
pastors do. Because pastors, your focus is your denomination
And
by
your
and
particular
large.
congregation, right?
Right. Yes. And then chaplain expands all of that into individuals,
Yeah,
regardless of what they
yeah,
personally believe and their faith background. But
yeah,
how do you be with a human being and provide those spiritual needs,
yeah.
right? And I
And that,
think,
yeah,
yeah, um, to me, I think chaplains are the unsung needed component in so much of what we're struggling with as a nation.
Amen and amen and amen. You know, I wholeheartedly 1000% agree with you that the public perception of what it means to be a faithful person can be so narrow and limiting that people cannot see themselves in that window, right? In that way. What a chaplain can bring is this is God, arms wide open, right?
Yeah.
This is what it means to be a decent human. You know, it's
we're as stakeholders go in the investment of the health of a community. There's such a narrow field that spiritual subject matter experts are allowed to participate in, and because we don't really have the language, and I think we don't know how to approach who we are as individuals that have a spiritual connection to something that is beyond us.
Absolutely. Last Thursday morning, I belong to one of the two Rotary clubs here in Eagen. And so last Thursday, the deputy fire chief is a member, and he gave a poignant statement of thanks for people supporting the police and fire during this awful, terrible time. And in an what is for those of us who are stoic, an unusual display of emotion, there were tears. And so I decided to speak up. I said, for those of you who don't know me yet, I am a pastor, and I am one of your police chaplains here in the city of Eagen. And I stand here with my brother in red. And if any of you find yourself in need of prayer, I hope you will approach me, because I'm always willing to sit with you. I just have at the 3rd District Convention, someone overheard us talking about chaplaincy, or at least overheard me talking about being a police chaplain. And I have no idea who this was, came up to me and said, I'm really struggling right now. I said, well, let's go out in the hallway and pray. 10 years ago, I don't know if even 5 years ago, I would have had the nerve to do that. To be that public about my faith.
Yeah. We're picking up today, Cindy, because we were involved in some technical difficulties. And so thank you for coming back on. One of the things that you were talking about at the 3rd District Convention is someone asked you to go out and to pray with them. And you didn't mention their name. No, there's something important about protecting people.
Absolutely, Kelly. One of the things that's really important to me, and I do this in my congregation, I do it really anywhere that I am, where people are inviting me into their lives, their personal lives, and asking for prayer, is I want to make sure I have their express consent. They have said yes when I have said, may I use your name? First name only. I never use a last name. But may I use your name as we lift up prayers of the people, perhaps in the congregation, perhaps in whatever setting I'm in, where someone has asked for prayer, or just to share a story even. Do I have permission to share your story? One of the things we do as Eagen police chaplains, and by the way, I'm grateful to our chief of police, who has given me express consent to share that I do serve as an Eagen police chaplain, and I'm proud to be part of the department. And one of the things we do at each one of our police chaplain staff meetings is we share the case study, the story of our call-outs. And again, all of that is privileged information. I would never repeat anyone's name. I may say in general the situation I was called to when people asked me about my role as a police chaplain. I can say, well, I was at the scene of an accident. I was at the scene where someone passed away. And that's all I'll say. I don't say where in Eagan because, while it's a big city, it's a small town. And so I try to make sure that in every setting, because I'm in many different settings in
Right.
different roles, that
Yeah.
we're making sure that we have permission to share personal information. And I did that with that veteran who asked for prayer. It's just, let's go off in a quiet place, and you need to know this will remain between us.
That's something that we're probably familiar in the medical world, HIPAA and things of that nature. But I think that chaplains, pastors, faith leaders are the bridge of evidencing, modeling how you respect individuals' autonomy or agency as an individual to determine what they're going to do with what they share with you. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, one of the things one of the stories I've always told is the time someone came to me with a complaint about the school superintendent. And before she could launch too far into her conversation, I said, you need to know he's my first cousin. See, we don't know who's listening. We don't know who's behind that name and how those people are maybe connected in some way. So it's always important wherever we are in our circles, when we're using someone's name or situation, to make sure we're guarding privacy. It's just a key thing.
It is. And when you're dealing with individuals that might be struggling, that co-care planning of empowering, like asking them what they want to have done with what they've shared is vital for chaplains as well as medical staff. But I think that we can do that as individuals because we're always tending to the soul of one another, aren't we? Or we can be.
Amen to that. I'll be at our Legion post meeting here, and people will share things with me because in my role as the chaplain for our post, people know they can come to me. And we just have to be very careful about how stories are told, where they're told, to whom they're told, and then how they're shared. It's vital, and it's a change. I think sometimes we're accustomed to being able to talk openly about someone, but we don't know what's behind their story or what's behind their situation. And it's hard, I know, because we want people to feel included and involved and part of, but still, boundaries need to be held.
The boundaries, it kind of is, there's that tension of that transparency versus boundaries of agency. Chaplains are really models and gatekeepers of that. So we're always about teaching how do you gatekeep.
I think you've hit on a key point: transparency. I mean, it's a big thing right now. Everybody, and I get it. I get it. But I also know that when stories are shared without appropriate boundaries being kept, that transparency can become gossip.
Yep.
I was appointed to a church where the pastor said there was no pastoral care in that congregation. Life would be easy there. What I found instead, and this is many, many, many years ago, was that the stories would often show up in a sermon or in some other setting. And transparency is a lovely thing, but we just can't always go there.
No, unless you have that permission.
Without that permission.
Without the permission. And so I thank you for that, because I do believe, as in the American Legion, sometimes those lines can get a little blurry or fudgy. And does the information stop with me, or how do I treat that information?
Well, and I think one of the other next steps for us to consider here as we're talking about this is there any indication in what this person is sharing with me of self-harm? Because that's a different layer as well.
Yeah.
Then as a, as an ordained person, I'm a mandated reporter. And that's another whole topic we could talk about, but we won't here. But that if there's any indication of self-harm, then the conversation needs to take a different turn. And that's where that whole, official capacity person that I am has to step out of my American Legion wear that I have on and put on that ordained person hat.
And I think that's one of the struggles that we have is, that assessment piece.
Yeah.
How do I know if this is something that is reportable? And so I know I've had training throughout all of my professional career, if you will, on when is and how do I assess. And I was just at the American Legion Washington conference. And Columbia University is unrolling what they call their Lighthouse Project. And this has to specifically do with suicide prevention. So we might be seeing it further in the American Legion family, if you will. But one of their pieces is teaching individuals I think some of our skills of how you determine if someone is at high risk or if this is really a struggle that they're having, and that listening is your main way to respond to it, or versus intervening and calling 988.
Yes.
So we'll see, hopefully it coming down, but
I'm really encouraged by this, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about this. But I think you hit on a nugget there too, is what we can do as Legionnaires as part of the Legion family is really the training around listening. Yeah. As simple as that.
Yeah.
Yes. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use your ears. What are you, listening for the story behind the story? Listening with empathy, with compassion, with care, whatever terms you want to use. I would use mercy, but that's kind of a churchy word. I get it. But really tuning in to what people are, because I keep saying this, is people want to be seen and they want to be heard. And when we can do that, we just bring something to the table that perhaps is missing right now, is the capacity to really listen. When someone's angry, where's that anger coming from? What does it stem from? If you're feeling sad, if you're, we don't know always what's going on in someone's life, all of the emotions, to just be learning how to listen well,
to not say, okay, I'm going to fix your problem, but tell me more. What are you experiencing that has brought you to this point? And that listening capacity really is just settling
really
in.
Simple. Wow, what I'm hearing is interesting. Could you share more about that? Or I'm intrigued by that. Or, gosh, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Would you like to talk some more about that? It doesn't have to feel forced or weird, because I think that's sometimes we're like, what do I say? And really, it's just maybe don't say anything. Just listen.
Just be there.
Yeah, just be there. Just be the one ready to listen.
Be there. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have enjoyed getting to know you more through this podcast session. So thank you. Wow. I look forward to working with you and being with you in the American Legion family, in the Department of Minnesota, and wherever it's going to take us. I'm looking forward to your retirement on a personal level. I know it's a little. So thank you for your time. Are there any words of wisdom you want to share with us before we take off?
American Legion family, we are blessed to be a family. We are blessed to have this connection where we continue to serve our country. I've had that opportunity, a grand total of about almost 12 years of service. But through the American Legion, we get to continue to hear the stories, share our stories, listen to stories, and be the one.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.